Heated Rivalry stars Connor Storrie Hudson and Hudson Williams are currently under pressure from fans of the show to out themselves to justify having their lead roles on the queer hockey show. Because being more believable at being a queer than you are at playing hockey simply isn't enough.
Did either of you play hockey?
No, I still don't.
The argument is this. Given how few positive, popular queer roles there are, having straight people play them means on-screen queer representation is still effectively straight, and that queer people get fewer roles because why hire a queer person to play a queer person when you could just get a straight person to do it, making the media safer for straight investors and audiences. After all, it's just pretend. Nobody's actually a disgusting faggot here, we're queer, but not really, and it's all just pretend, so you have nothing to fear. And I actually agree with the sentiment behind this. That came into being because for a long time, queer roles were exceedingly few and were given to straight actors. Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, the Brokeback Boys, even in shows like Will and Grace, the first real out main character on a TV show about being gay was played by a straight man. And not very well. Helen DeGenerate even had her show canceled because she came out. Did you know Natasha Lyonne is straight? Because nobody else does, because she has been in the queerest roles for so much of her career. I looked it up, and there's even a webpage dedicated to this, because of course there is. I love you, Letterboxd. Look me up on there. I have incredibly thoughtful and poignant reviews. I went into Heated Rivalry with no spoilers, never having even seen the actors' photos. All I knew was gay hockey show that's short enough you can watch it in a day. And 1 week, on the 7th day, I rested. Because like God, I was hungover. And I watched it all. And I loved it. Hot, sweet, hot, beautiful, meaningful, hot. Everything Team Me would have died to have had as a show I could become way too obsessed with. Like I was with Queer as Folk. And I'll admit that when I was done watching and allowed myself to look more into the show on social media, I was a bit surprised to see that neither of the actors had discussed being openly queer. Because listen... Is gaydar problematic? Maybe. Do I have it and does it work? Absolutely. You might even call it my fourth sense. And these men's? Sweetie. Straight?
This is liar told you that.
I was in the trenches of the internet fighting for only queer people to get queer roles on early Twitter, which was really late Tumblr, which is now currently TikTok. But my thinking on the topic has evolved both as we got more and more queer characters and more queer people playing them, but also as I began to balance my belief in the power and necessity of representation with this tricky little sticking point that humans have rights. People who perform labor for money should have rights. Rights such as privacy and to not be discriminated against. So let's zoom out from a Heated Rivalry and think about what it actually means if only queer people can play queer roles. And I heard y'all sick freaks like little lists, so here's my top 5 reasons why identity-based casting for queer roles is more than a little problematic. Compulsory outing's a little sketchy, eh? The creator of Heated Rivalry, the TV show, Jacob Tierney, said this when asked how he felt about this discourse.
I don't think there's any reason to get into that stuff. I'll tell you something about the casting of both of these roles. You can't ask questions like that when you're casting, right? It's actually against the law, so what you have to gauge is somebody's enthusiasm and willingness to do the work. And that's what's so impressive about both of these guys, is they came into this being like, yeah, we're here to do this, and we're here to make the story feel authentic and to be as real as possible. And they fucking hit it out of the park.
And first off, he's right, and that's a good thing. It should be illegal to ask a potential employee if they're gay or not. But let's expound on what it would mean if it weren't. Tying employment to disclosed sexual orientation effectively creates a system where workers must surrender deeply personal information to qualify for a job. No worker in any industry should have to reveal their sexuality as a precondition for employment. This is a fundamental labor rights issue. In a world where Hollywood is in Trump's fucking America, you want people to have to put themselves on a list of queer people? People are using the term queer baiting about Heated Rivalry now because of this, and I just have to say that it's okay to look up a term before you use it. I've even done it once. Queer baiting is when a piece of media, not an actor just playing a role, hints or suggests at queerness, but never follows through. They do it because they want the queer dollar and fandom, but don't want to risk alienating homophobes. Well, let's just say homophobes alienated. This bait was gobbled up. It was swallowed. If you want to say an actor is queerbaiting because they have a free and joyous attitude that isn't homophobic and isn't ruled by toxic masculinity, then that may be just your own homophobia and desire to uphold gender roles for heterosexuals. And really, haven't they been through enough Divorce rates through the roof. Only like 3 of them are funny. And unlike gay people, straight people don't even get to go to heaven because God thinks they taste bland. Accusing an actual human of queerbaiting is accusing someone of being straight, which in my house is a slur. When Kit Connor played bisexual Nick in the extremely adorable teen drama romance series Heartstopper, people began to accuse the then 17-year-old actor of queerbaiting because he wasn't out. This resulted in a backlash against him that was extreme and clearly very harmful based on his eventual response to the harassment a year later on Twitter.
Back for a minute. I'm bi. Congrats for forcing an 18-year-old to out himself. I think some of you missed the point of this show. Bye.
What a win for queer people, right? I mean, not the ones doing the representation we say so sorely matters, but the principle that workers should not be compelled to disclose personal information as a condition of employment should not be controversial among progressive people. It is foundational to labor rights, to privacy rights, and to any coherent leftist understanding of the relationship between workers and the institutions that employ them. Decades of actual queer leftist fighting is how we've established that employers have no right to demand information about a worker's sexual orientation, romantic life, medical history, reproductive choices, or any other aspect of their private existence that does not directly and materially affect their capacity to perform the work in question. Acting is work. When we accept the premise that an actor must be gay to play a gay role, we are implicitly accepting that an employer has the right to inquire into, verify, and make hiring decisions based on a worker's sexual orientation. How cool! What could go wrong? This is not progressive. It is the precise mechanism of discrimination that LGBTQ+ labor activists have fought against for generations, simply inverted and rebranded. The direction of the discrimination does not change its fundamental nature. It is still an employer making a hiring decision based on a worker's sexuality, and it still requires the worker to disclose that sexuality in order to be considered. No amount of progressive framing changes the material reality of what is being demanded, that a human being must open up a portal to the private dimensions of their life to an employer, a casting director, a studio, and ultimately the public in order to be allowed to perform that job, which could be extremely dangerous. Last week, when bisexual Pascal Kaiser proposed to his same-sex fiancée during a match in front of 50,000 people, he immediately began receiving threatening messages, including ones that included his address. Police told him there was no immediate threat. 20 minutes after he got off the phone with the authorities, he was attacked in his own garden. Coming out as someone with countless eyes on you becoming visible representation can be dangerous. And coming out disproportionately harms marginalized actors. Actors from conservative families, religious communities, countries with anti-LGBTQ+ laws, or marginalized racial and ethnic backgrounds may face disproportionate danger from being outed. A policy that requires disclosure privileges those who already have the social safety net to come out comfortably, reinforcing existing class, racial, and geographic hierarchies. An out white gay man later in his career who acts full-time is going to get a lot more roles than an out black lesbian at the beginning of hers who works retail. But this rule isn't selectively applied, so she has just as much responsibility to out herself, potentially risking whatever job she's doing that's actually paying her bills. And for who should she potentially lose her job? People on social media who watch the show on their friend's Netflix account they don't pay for? Established wealthy actors with public platforms can come out with relative security in comparison to actors earlier in their careers. Unknown actors trying to break into the industry face far greater professional and personal risk. This policy would entrench class divisions within the acting profession, only benefiting those who are already privileged and those sitting at home with nothing to lose when one of these workers is outed. The ability to come out publicly is not equally distributed. It is profoundly shaped by class. An established actor with financial security, an existing fan base, a supportive management team, and the cultural capital to weather potential backlash occupies an entirely different reality than a 22-year-old from a working class background trying to land their first speaking role. The established actor can come out in a carefully managed magazine interview, receive an outpouring of public support, and continue booking work with minimal disruption to their career. The unknown actor has none of these protections. They may be financially dependent on a family that would disown them. They may come from a community or cultural background where being openly queer carries severe social consequences. They may not yet have an agent, a publicist, or any professional infrastructure to help them navigate the fallout. For this person, a policy that requires disclosed queerness as a precondition for being cast in a queer role is not empowering. It is quite literally disempowering. It is taking away their autonomy and choice, their power to choose. It is a demand that they sacrifice their safety and their personal relationships for the possibility of work that is by no means guaranteed and is almost always short-term. The policy in practice functions as a filter that favors those who already possess the economic and social resources to be publicly out, which means it favors those who are already privileged. It transforms what should be a deeply personal decision made on one's own terms and timeline into a professional calculation driven by economic necessity, and it punishes those who cannot afford the cost of disclosure. Class does not operate in isolation, which is why you went to class in high school with like 20 other kids. It intersects with geography, race, ethnicity, religion, and immigration status in ways that make this policy exponentially more harmful for the most vulnerable actors. Consider an actor who emigrated from a country where homosexuality is criminalized and who still has living family there. Should they trust that they'll never be deported? That publicly putting a target on their backs is safe, all while masked militia from ICE are rounding people up off the streets and sending them God knows where, if not killing them? It's the progressive position now that those people should be forced to come out to work in film or TV shows in roles that aren't straight. For so many people, the calculation around public disclosure is not simply about career risk. It is about physical safety, family support, community belonging, and survival. A casting policy that requires openness about sexuality as a condition of employment does not account for any of these intersecting vulnerabilities. It applies a single universal standard to people living in radically different circumstances, and in doing so, it systematically excludes precisely the people whose stories and perspectives the industry most needs. The actors who can most easily meet the requirements are disproportionately white, financially comfortable, urban, and from culturally liberal backgrounds, which means the policy, far from diversifying queer representation on screen, actually narrows it. Should we be commodifying our identities? Treating sexuality as a job qualification transforms an intimate aspect of personhood into a professional commodity. I don't know how I feel about queerness becoming something of yourself you are forced to sell. It becomes less about your passion, your drive, your art, skill, and in my opinion, tokenizes you. Require a queer? Check the approved list. I'd be on it. Wait, would it be better for my unburgeoning acting career if only queers could get queer roles? I'm queers. Yeah. No, I changed my mind. Be sure to see me starring in the oncoming horror film, The Unburgeoning, out in unselect theaters this autumn. But capitalism has always sought to absorb, repackage, and sell back to people the very identities and struggles that define their lives. Queerness is no exception. Over the past several decades, the market has discovered that LGBTQ+ identity is extraordinarily profitable. Sometimes. Pride Month generates billions in revenue, queer aesthetics are mined for fashion and branding, coming out narratives are packaged as content, and the language of liberation is repurposed as marketing copy for corporations that have no material commitment to protecting queer lives. This is the broader context in which identity-matched casting operates, and it cannot be separated from it. When an actor's queerness becomes a line item on a resume, a credential to be verified, a marketable attribute that makes them eligible for certain roles, their identity has been fully absorbed into the logic of capital. It is no longer something they live and experience on their own terms. It is something they perform for an employer in exchange for wages. Their sexuality has been transformed from an intimate, complex, evolving dimension of their personhood into a professional asset to be leveraged, a commodity to be evaluated, and ultimately a product to be consumed by audiences who are themselves being sold a carefully packaged version of queerness that is palatable, profitable, and stripped of its most radical potential. This is the market doing what it's always done, identifying something authentic and human, extracting its value, and discarding the rest. I would rather fight for a world in which sexual orientation is not a resource to be exploited, not a credential to be verified, and not a commodity to be bought and sold. I want a world where a person's queerness belongs to them fully, unconditionally, and without obligation to make it legible, productive, or useful to any institution, including the entertainment industry. And if they want to do what I do and be a big gay jester, they should be able to do that too, because it's about choice. An actor who discloses their sexuality to book a role is not choosing to share something personal about themselves. They're making a transaction. The studio that hires them is not honoring their identity. It is purchasing authenticity as a brand attribute. The audience that consumes the final product is not witnessing genuine representation born from artistic freedom. They are consuming a carefully manufactured image of queerness that has been filtered through the same corporate machinery that produces every other profitable cultural product. The commodification of queerness is not a side effect of capitalism. It is capitalism functioning exactly as intended, finding new markets, new resources, and new identities to extract value from. A world in which your sexuality is a job qualification is a world in which capitalism has found another way to own even more of you. And I don't see people talking about one of the biggest issues with how this would work in practice. What is representation? How identical does the identity need to be? How are we doing this? Logistically. Because if this is the rule here, those things need to be ironed out. Can a gay man play a bisexual man? Can a non-binary person play a binary trans person? If representation in media matters, and I believe it matters greatly, is it really representation if a non-binary trans person like myself were to play a trans man or a trans woman? Is it really representation when someone who has grown up being the biggest fucking who is the farthest thing from bisexual you can possibly imagine were to play a bi dude? Or do we segregate the roles more along gender? I think having a femme trans dude play me in a biopic would be based, but I'm sure some people would say, why hire a man to play a non-binary person? And in some ways, I don't disagree with that. And in some ways I do. The thing is, I still feel in my heart that these roles are best played by people who understand them, who can do them justice. I just can't see a way in which this is actually put into practice that doesn't cause material harm to queer people. Far more harm than feeling less represented in some media. If you can think of a way, leave it in the comments. And this brings us to the next stage. Say we agreed. Employers can ask if you're gay before hiring you for gay roles. We've decided, say, as long as you're in the community, you can play basically any role in the community, even the really good ones. I'm trying to do a little more of a steel man argument. Well, how do you make them prove it? It costs $0 to see you're queer. I'm queer. See? Wild, I know, but it's free. And I've said it many times. Say your potential boss is about to hire you for your dream job, and they have one question left.
Hey bro, you suckling that dickles? Riding that vein train?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Great, you're hired.
Now what? What's next? They call your references, ask to see your Grindr profile, take a pee sample, check your chromosomes for the gay gene? Like, sure, if you're a celebrity who has a long storied career and is already out, then they know that already. They don't have to ask. But what about for roles like Heated Rivalry that went to 2 unknown actors? How would they have proved this? Like, what do you want them to do? Oh, you're gay? Then kiss a man. Let me see how well you can ride this 8-inch dildo. Well, baby, they're about to. And they do a lot more than that. A lot more than that. They are spitting on it. They're munching, slurping, gagging. They are fiending, crawling, begging for that pussy, hungry for that man sweat. And just wait until you see what happens when they're not playing hockey. It's like, clearly, if they're not queer in some way, they'd be able to convince you they were. They sure as shit convinced me. I have seen less graphic scenes in porn. If these actors aren't gay enough for you, the problem could be you. And finally, the penultimate point of my 5 points, the 6th and final point. This addresses no intersectional structural issues. When the conversation about LGBTQ+ equity in entertainment narrows to who is playing the role, it creates a convenient illusion that the industry is addressing its deep-rooted homophobia. Studios can point to identity-matched casting as evidence of their commitment to inclusion, while leaving every exploitative structure completely intact. The same executives who greenlight these casting decisions may simultaneously be suppressing queer storylines for international markets, underpaying queer crew members, or maintaining workplace cultures where harassment goes unaddressed. Identity-matched casting becomes a PR shield, a way for corporations to perform progressivism without undertaking any of the costly, uncomfortable structural reforms that would actually redistribute power within the industry to marginalized people. If the test of how well a piece of media represents queer people is who is cast to act in it, it allows those in power to obfuscate that the far more consequential question is not who stands in front of the camera, but who sits behind it, and more metaphorically above it. The entertainment industry remains overwhelmingly controlled by straight, cisgender, white executives who determine which stories get told, how they're told, and how much money is allocated to tell them. Half of them are probably in the fucking Epstein files. A gay actor cast in a gay role but directed by a straight director, working from a script written by straight writers, produced by a straight production team, and distributed by a studio that will edit out the queerness for certain markets, has not achieved meaningful representation. The power structure remains untouched, focusing on what is essentially the least powerful person's identity, while ignoring the entire chain of creative and financial control only continues the cycle. It plays into it. It hurts our movement. The entertainment industry runs on precarious labor, short-term contracts, no benefits, extreme income volatility, and a massive power imbalance between workers and the corporations that employ them. LGBTQ plus workers across the industry face compounded precarity. Queer grips, makeup artists, costume designers, editors, assistants, and countless off-camera workers face discrimination with far less visibility or protection than actors do. A casting policy that focuses exclusively on who plays the role does absolutely nothing for these workers. It centers the most visible, most glamorous, and often most financially secure tier of the industry while rendering invisible the vast majority of queer people who actively make film and television happen. A genuinely leftist approach would prioritize industry-wide labor protections, anti-discrimination enforcement, union power, and equitable pay, changes that uplift all queer workers, not just the ones audiences see on screen. I'm sure some of the people yelling at actors to come out or be deemed queer-baiting homophobes may be fighting for these workers' rights as well, but let's be real, many of them are not. And all of them are perpetuating a dangerous system that denies the rights of queer actors, not furthers them. It is in fact regressive, not progressive, to stand in support of employers being able to question the sexuality of their employees. We have seen over the past few years what representation without protection does for us. Corporations adopt the language and aesthetics of social justice to neutralize demands for real change. It is the same logic behind rainbow-branded merchandise during Pride Month from companies that donate to anti-LGBTQ plus politicians, or diversity initiatives that increase the visibility of marginalized faces in boardrooms while doing nothing about wage gaps or exploitative labor practices further down the chain. Identity-matched casting fits neatly into this playbook. It is a discreet, marketable, headline-friendly action that costs a studio very little while generating significant goodwill. It requires no redistribution of wealth, no alteration of power dynamics, no ceding of creative control to marginalized community. It allows the industry to capture the progressive energy of LGBTQ plus advocacy and channel it into something commercially useful and structurally harmless. When progressives rally behind this kind of policy without demanding deeper reforms, they are unwittingly doing the work of the very corporate structures they should be challenging. If the goal is genuine equity for LGBTQ plus people in entertainment, the demand should be far more ambitious and far more threatening to existing power structures. That means queer people in positions of executive authority with genuine green light power. It means mandating comprehensive anti-discrimination protections and accountability mechanisms across all levels of production, not just on-screen talent. It means funding queer-led production companies, sponsoring independent queer cinema that doesn't have to pass through the filter of corporate palatability, and building pipeline programs that bring LGBTQ plus people, especially those from working class backgrounds, communities of color, and the global south, into writing rooms, director's chairs, and editing suites. It means strengthening unions so that all workers, including queer workers, have collective bargaining power against exploitative employers. It means challenging the international distribution model that allows studios to profit from queer stories domestically while erasing them abroad. These are the structural interventions that would materially transform the lives of LGBTQ plus people in the industry. None of them are as simple or as photogenic as a casting announcement that the man who plays Ilya also eats dick for breakfast. The Breakfast of Champions. Yes, I like knowing that the queer character I'm relating to is played by someone I might also relate to, parasocially. But it changes nothing about the fundamental distribution of power, wealth, and opportunity in an industry that remains deeply hostile to queer people in countless ways that never make headlines. And I'm trying my best to resist the temptation to celebrate representation divorced from redistribution. The question I'm trying to ask isn't, is a gay person playing this role? It's who profits from this story? Who controls it? Who is protected on set? Who has healthcare? Who can organize? Who gets to tell their own story on their own terms? Rather than creating a system that demands disclosure and thereby entrenches existing hierarchies of privilege, a genuinely leftist approach would focus on dismantling the conditions that make the closet a survival strategy in the first place. That means building an industry where coming out carries no professional penalty, where agents don't quietly advise clients to stay closeted for marketability, where casting directors don't unconsciously pigeonhole openly queer actors into narrow role types, where studios don't calculate an actor's international box office viability based on their perceived sexuality. It means robust anti-discrimination protections with real enforcement mechanisms instead of just like aspirational diversity statements on corporate websites. It means union contracts that explicitly protect workers from being penalized for their sexual orientation or for choosing not to disclose it. It means creating mentorship programs, financial support structures, and professional networks specifically designed to support early career queer actors from underrepresented backgrounds, giving them the resources and security to make their own choices about disclosure without economic coercion. The goal should be an industry where any actor can be openly queer without consequence, and where no actor is forced to be openly queer as a condition of employment. Proponents of identity-matched casting often frame disclosure as a positive act of visibility, as though coming out for a role is an empowering choice rather than a coerced transaction. But choices made under economic pressure are not truly free choices. When a working actor is told, explicitly or implicitly, that they will not be considered for a role unless they publicly identify as queer, the resulting disclosure is not an act of liberation. It is an act of compliance with an employer's demand, performed under the threat of lost income and lost opportunity. This is the same coercive dynamic that leftists rightly identify in countless other labor contexts. The worker who chooses to work overtime without pay because they know they'll be fired if they refuse. The employee who voluntarily submits to invasive monitoring because the alternative is unemployment. The gig worker who agrees to exploitative terms because no better options exist. The language of choice obscures the reality of power. An actor who comes out because they genuinely want to, on their own timeline, surrounded by support and free from professional consequences, is exercising agency. An actor who comes out because a casting notice or an industry norm demands it, who does so not when they are ready, but when a production schedule requires it, who does so knowing that refusal means losing the role to someone willing to disclose, that actor is not exercising agency. They're submitting to a labor condition that no worker in any industry should be subjected to. Freedom is not merely the absence of explicit prohibition, but the presence of genuine material ability to choose without coercion. And by that standard, compulsory outing, no matter how it is framed in the language of representation and authenticity, is not freedom. It is a new form of control imposed on workers by an industry that has never hesitated to exploit the personal lives of its labor force for profit, and it should be recognized and resisted as such. Now, there are some stipulations I'd probably make here, though. If you're casting a trans woman and you cast a man and go through the effort of doing some Hollywood makeup magic transition instead of just casting a woman, the character that's being played, I'd say people would be right to say, what the fuck? I also think there's room for a lot more nuance here to evaluate how problematic a casting might be on a case-by-case basis. And also there's room to admit that sometimes a casting decision makes a show boring or cringe or just bad, and it's okay to dislike something simply because you think it sucks. Because I do think that when a role is miscast, it can be detrimental to the project. You're free to criticize that. If a character is meant to be high femme and we just get an offensively bad parody because the actor doesn't have the range, go ahead and pop open social media and piss all over it. Piss all over it. But be prepared to find out from someone in your replies that this offensive bad parody is exactly how someone in real life probably acts. And you've just told them that the way they express their queerness isn't just ridiculous, it offends you because you're so anti-homophobic that stereotypical gay people make you uncomfortable. I'm currently working on a few investigations, so if you want to follow along with those and get secret information not available anywhere else, you can sign up for a membership on Patreon or YouTube and see them happening live on my members' Discord. Please do. Being gay is extremely expensive. Sharing the video, even to your own email, tells stupid YouTube that this video is worth watching. So after liking and subscribing and hyping, do me a huge favor and do that. Check out my podcast, Respect the Dead, where we talk shit about dead people who sucked, like L. Ron Hubbard, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Fred Trump. And in 6 weeks, Charles Entertainment Kirk himself. I also have merch, like this shirt, kind of. It's cute as hell, and something tells me you look so good in it. I made this merch out of my fave line from Heated Rivalry. Stupid Canadian wolf bird. Okay, that's it. Love you. Bye.